Wow, I've been waiting for this podcast for a long time. Jerry Freund. Jerry, nice to have you on the Art Dealer Diaries. Welcome.
It's great to be here. I feel honored, Michael.
Michael. I'm going to take that as a joke because I'm pretty sure it was.
It was.
Jerry's worked for me for 20 years. And
I was thinking of Michael Ettema.
Yeah. Michael, if you're out there and listening to this, Jerry has you on his mind. But, yeah, you've worked for me for 20 years. I know a lot about you just from chats and this and that.
Sure,
but
yeah.
I don't really know all. And that's what I'm here today. I want to find out what I don't know. And I bet there's a lot that I don't know. So let's just start at the beginning. You're born in Kansas City, right?
No.
Kansas. Well, you're from Kansas.
I was born and raised in Dodge City,
Dodge
Kansas.
City, Kansas.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
1941.
You went to your university was
right.
Kansas. Okay, so Dodge City,
Right.
Old West.
Old West. And my grandfather actually ran away from home and settled in Dodge City in 1874 as a young man, 16 years old.
So where did he run away from?
Iowa.
And why did he run away? Do you know?
I think he saw the farm work just overbearing.
Yeah, which it would be.
And one of all places in the world,
yeah,
he went to Dodge City.
Yeah, and so why Dodge City? Do you know?
I think in those days it was an exciting place to go.
Yeah,
maybe like Hollywood.
Yeah,
writers.
That's
were
a first.
Writers were writing about Dodge in those days, and it was in one of the Texas trails.
Yes,
and also I found later on, not only in, but they came through Dodge, running the cattle from Texas up to Wyoming and Montana.
Yeah.
They go through Dodge.
That was a big stop off, wasn't it?
It was a big stop off.
I mean, that was like, and so yeah, in 1874, that would have been at the height of the cattle stuff, really.
That's
right? Yeah. So he came, that's probably why he came there then, maybe even. He saw opportunity for jobs, because they must have, that must have been out there in the literature.
He was 16 years old.
Yeah.
So, and he actually worked for Bat Masterson. Now, that was a real person.
Yeah.
Now, he was not in the law enforcement. He was a gopher. He would go for this and that, He was an errand boy for the office.
Your grandfather.
My grandfather.
Not Bat Masterson.
That's correct.
But Bat Masterson was a law officer, right?
That's
he was a sheriff, right?
Absolutely.
And so he worked for him, just kind of being a gopher. And then, and how long did he do that?
For 4 years.
Wow.
And what's interesting, in 1943, J. Frank Dobie, a very famous Western writer, interviewed my grandfather. And so a couple of his stories appear in his book, Mustangs. And when I was a kid, the radio program, Gunsmoke, always made it to Dodge, but we never had television. And it wasn't until 1956 that we actually got television. So we could see there was actually a movie, TV program called Gunsmoke.
And was that supposed to be, was Gunsmoke set in Dodge? It was Dodge City, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's all about Dodge.
Yeah, I remember that.
And, of course, it's all set. It was filmed in Hollywood.
Do they call it Dodge or Dodge City?
No, they call it Dodge City.
Yeah.
But the movie was called, or the TV show was called Gunsmoke.
Yeah, no, I remember it.
But it was interesting because
barely.
They set a lot of the scenes, used local names, and stuff like that.
So your grandfather he worked for Bat Masterson for 4 years, and then what did he end up doing?
Well, he ended up going up to a small town called Jetmore, about 25 miles north of Dodge, settled down, got a good job there, and then moved to a place called Lebo, Kansas. And at that point, he and his horse, he delivered the rural mail to the farmers. And what happened was that he would pick up notes from the farmers and say, well, did you know Susie Jones was in the hospital? And he would relate to the other people. And then he got the idea of printing a newspaper, including all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And it became the Lebo Enterprise.
And how far from Dodge is that?
It's about 250 miles.
So it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, really.
Yeah.
And so he started the newspaper?
He started the newspaper. And
didn't it get a Pulitzer?
No.
Okay, sorry, must have been something else.
But all his children, my mother's sister and her sisters and brothers, all delivered the Kansas City Star,
Uh-huh.
and the Lebo
I
Enterprise.
see. Yeah. And so your dad was born in Lebo?
My dad was born in Lebo.
Yeah.
Grew up on a farm there,
Yeah.
yes, just about 5 miles outside. And my mother, of course, grew up in Lebo, Kansas, and was part of the Evans clan. My grandfather actually had 12 children,
Yeah. Wow.
and 2 did not make it. But
Yeah.
other than that,
Yeah.
so there were 10.
So your dad had 9 siblings.
No, that was my mother.
Oh, your mother did?
Yes.
Okay.
And my father had 3 other brothers, so
I
there
see.
were 4 boys in that clan.
And so what did your dad, so he grew up there, so what did he do?
Well, he was pretty innovative. He realized, certainly, he came of age out of high school during the Depression,
Mm-hmm.
realized there were very few jobs out there. But he had heard that western Kansas and Oklahoma, western Oklahoma, the Panhandle, there were jobs out there. So he packed his bags and went out there.
With shovels to get rid of the dirt that was all going away at the Dust
He
Bowl.
arrived in the middle of the Dust
I
Bowl.
mean, that's the
Yeah.
worst. Everybody's completely leaving that area, going to
I
California.
know, and he's going just the opposite, and actually finding work.
Yeah.
He had a farming background,
Yeah.
and he found that he could hire out to process beef.
Yeah.
You know, you take it from, tie the old cow up to the windmill and take it from that point.
Yeah. And so this was in western Oklahoma?
Yes,
And
this was in, I can't remember, some small town in western
Yeah.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, because that really was the heart of the Dust Bowl right
and
there.
then Liberal, Kansas, and places like
Uh-huh.
that where he worked. He found a job in the grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a background. He bought from the farmers because he knew good produce and stuff. And so they saw he was valuable. And my dad always told me when I was growing up, the food business, everybody has to eat.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that old came out of the Depression.
Right. Right. He was right in the heart of that.
He was right
one.
in the heart of it.
And so, but somehow he ended up back in Dodge City.
That's correct. He was offered a great job with J.S. Dillon and Son Supermarket. Now, it wasn't called, it was grocery stores in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And so he took a manager's job there, and it turned out to be number 2 store for the Dillon Company.
Mm-hmm.
And my father managed that store, then expanded, became a regional supervisor all over southwest Kansas, but operated out of Dodge.
Mm-hmm.
And later on in the 1960s, the Dillon brothers, it became Dillon's and Sons, they bought Fry's in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
They purchased King Soopers in Colorado.
They became big.
They became
Yeah.
really big.
Right. And did your father get to see any of that kind of?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, that's great.
So,
But
he
you
reti-
but you grow up in Dodge City.
Yep.
Dodge City.
Yep.
And so you don't have to give a date because we don't have to know exactly how old you are. But you kind of grew up in that post World War II time frame.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so what was that like growing up in Dodge City?
Well,
Were you an only child?
I was an only child.
Yeah.
Yes. So I had lots of friends.
Yeah.
And one of my best friends was right next door.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a Pawnee Indian family
Oh.
who worked for the Santa Fe. Dodge City was a division point on the Santa Fe Railway.
Uh-huh.
And they had a son my age. So we ran around all the time together, at least for the first 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And later on, when I joined the Boy Scouts, when I was 11, and but they would take me to Pawnee, Oklahoma,
Mm.
and I learned to dance in the powwows. In those days, they were kind of closed. You know, it wasn't an open thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I met a lot of Pawnee Indians, and they showed me how to build fancy costumes and things.
And so was there a racial divide at that time? I mean, I know there was, but did
Yeah.
you feel it? I mean, was that kind of,
Well, I never felt isolated or outside.
Mm-hmm. You mean when you were dancing with the Pawnee?
That's correct.
What about the other way around, though, when the Pawnee were in Dodge City?
Well,
was
the
there
Pawnee really were located in Oklahoma.
Yeah. But
and
your
so
friend
Dod-
wasn't. He was in Dodge
That's
City.
right. Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to what was it like for him being a Native
That's a
American kid
great
growing up in
question.
Dodge City.
I never asked him. I think he felt pretty much a part of the group or society and that sort of thing. Dodge.
And did you know him all through school and high school, or just in the early?
I knew him all through junior high.
Yeah.
Or middle school.
You know him since then? Have you tried to reach out?
I've lost track.
Yeah. If you're out there, give Jerry a call. So, but you started dancing with the Pawnee,
right?
Doing powwow dances,
right?
And you really got into the Native American culture,
absolutely,
at that time, which was kind of a big thing too, right?
It was. I mean, and it was interesting because I enjoyed sports, but I found the outdoors, and dancing, Indian dancing with the Indians, because a lot of them we camped out. Go down to Pawnee, Oklahoma, and then there was Pawnee Bill's trading posts. And it was Gordon Lilly, I think he was. He became a close friend of Buffalo Bill, and so he ultimately put together a show, but had kind of retired from that. In fact, I think by the time I was there, he was deceased, but the trading posts continued on, and the Indians, the Pawnees, continued to buy from it and get supplies and that sort of thing. And that's where I got my first beaded belt.
And how old were you then?
Probably 11.
And was this an old belt or a new belt, or do you even know?
This was actually a belt, and I actually met the person who had made it for his son. And I look at it now.
I was going to say, undoubtedly, you still have it.
Oh, yeah. But yes, it's. I look at it, I can say, my waist was that small.
Yeah, you were dancing. Yeah. Remember the days when you used to dance? So you started at 11. You had an affinity for Native American cultures, for dancing, for the Pawnee, and also for their artwork.
That's correct.
Yeah, and it was mainly the beadwork probably at that point in time, because that's what you were exposed to.
That's exactly. Yeah. And later on, the Boy Scout troop that I had joined in Dodge decided to focus on Plains Indian culture. And so that was another added piece. And so we began studying Plains Indian culture, and at 14 I could become an Explorer Scout. And then
I remember that. I was one of those.
Yeah, good. Yeah. And at that point, we actually were serious about studying and actually put dances together, went around western Kansas, Colorado, and that sort of thing, putting on dances. And we were connected. We were called the Caddoan Indian dances, named after the Caddo tribes.
Right, in eastern Louisiana and that area.
And then we tied up. The scoutmaster was a very close friend of a person by the name of Buck Brashears.
I know that. I've heard that name.
And yeah, he was the scoutmaster at La Junta, Colorado.
That's
and the Kajari Indian group, which are all Boy Scouts. And
which still exists, right?
It is, yes. And I got to tell you, Mark, if you ever get to La Junta, Colorado.
I've stopped in. I've seen it.
Oh, you have?
Yeah. Okay, beautiful art, all sorts of interesting things.
That's right.
And so how old was the Kajari organization at that point when you started?
Buck had founded it in 1924. Okay. So I was there about 1950, 55.
Yeah, so it had been going on for 30 years. So it had a long history.
Yeah, and the people of La Junta.
Yeah, which is in eastern Colorado.
The Kiva. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, along the Santa Fe Trail.
Right. The question is, in that group, were there any Native Americans?
There were two.
Yeah.
Two that were scouts and dancers.
Yeah.
But Buck had brought in a Koshari. Buck had brought to the Kosharis a person who became one of my favorites and still a favorite hero, Woody Krembo.
Oh, yeah. He brought him there.
Yep. And he worked with us at La Junta.
In painting?
In painting, but mostly costume building. And
this was early 50s again?
Yep, mid-50s.
Yeah. And so those who don't know, Woody Krembo is a very famous Native American Oklahoma artist. Right. Great watercolors. Just, really important artist.
He claimed Kiowa ancestry, but I do know he told me he was actually, his mother was full-blooded Potawatomi in Kansas. So he had that close connection to Kansas, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And also later on in life, very close connection with Gilcrease.
Yes, very much so.
In fact, I think they still have most of his major paintings.
Yeah, they do. They do have a great number of them.
But the one that impressed me the most was one that he called Spotted Wolf's Request.
Mm-hmm. And was that in the Kajari
Yes,
collection?
that's correct.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether he donated. I suspect he may have donated
Probably.
that. And Spotted Wolf's Last Request.
Mm.
And Spotted Wolf was a Lakota Indian serving in Belgium in 1944.
Mm-hmm.
He was killed. And his commander, there was a request, and that was to take his body back to the Lakota reservation and have a parade. But he didn't want it just for him. He wanted it for all Native Americans
Mm-hmm.
who had died in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And Woody Krembo was very, very impressed with that. And although he didn't attend the funeral of Spotted Wolf, he did create this incredible painting of bringing all together Lakota culture and language.
And so how big was that painting?
Oh,
Do you know?
Seems to me it was close to about 3 foot by 4 foot.
Yeah, so it was a big kind of a mural that was
Yeah.
inside the Kiva area.
Right. Uh huh.
Yeah, so it really.
Well, no, it
where was it?
It was actually painted on canvas or board,
Uh-huh.
but it was a separate standalone painting.
Yeah.
It hangs in their museum now.
But it made an impact on you.
Oh, absolutely.
Still does. Obviously, you can remember the name
You
of the
bet,
painting.
yeah.
And why do you think that is, that it made such an impact?
Because out of nowhere, I see this painting
Mm-hmm.
that ties together everything that I was learning, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the death scaffolds, the use of the buffalo skull,
Right.
and all these things were all integrated.
And also you think because you had met and known Woody Krembo that brought
Yeah.
it to life too, maybe more?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we talked about, you know, he had spent time in Wichita, Kansas. He had spent time in Lawrence, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
He knew Kansas pretty well. He went to an Indian school.
Mm-hmm.
An agriculture school was not too far from, we call it Ark City or Arkansas City,
Mm-hmm.
or as we in Kansas call it, Arkansas
Mm-hmm.
City.
Yeah.
It's the Arkansas River, not the Arkansas River.
Right. Yeah, you are from Kansas. And did Woody Krembo talk about being in boarding school at all? Did he mention any of
He
that?
did.
Uh-huh.
And he was one of those who, and I think I brought it to your attention,
Yeah.
who felt, at first it was a little bizarre for him, but later
Sure.
on, it was a great resource for him.
Yeah.
Because he attended a boarding school that focused in agriculture.
Yeah.
And so very early on, he had skills to go out and farm in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Well, we had discussed, you just because I just finished a book called Indian School Days, which is a fiction book in the my murder mystery series, but it's about, you know, what boarding school could do on the other end of the spectrum. For some, it was good. Some people had good results and fond memories, and others have just the opposite, horrible memories, and it damaged them. And I took the latter premise in my book. But it is good to hear that he had a positive experience, and he even was willing to share that with
That's
you.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So this painting stuck in your mind.
It stuck in my mind. I
And you-
still remember it today almost.
Yeah. And
I
do
haven't
you
looked at it.
have you gone? Is it still there? Do you
Yes,
think?
it is.
Yeah.
So far as I know,
Yeah.
I went back. Actually, Michael Ettema
Mm-hmm.
had been asked to help review and maybe put a show together with their artifacts.
Yeah.
And so Michael came to me to talk to me a little bit. And I said, it's still there that I
Yeah.
know for. And that was 5 years ago.
Yeah. You know, those things do affect people. In our little town I grew up in, Portales,
Mhm.
we had a huge theater, a single theater, and in that theater were big murals. They were WPA murals.
Sure.
And these were 10 by 30 feet, huge, right? And I remember just sitting in that theater all the time looking at them, and they were all of the Old West, right, with wagon trains,
Wow.
and it was all about that. I don't know the artist. The theater, I think in the 80s, burned down and it's lost. But I do remember that those murals made a difference. I can still remember sitting in them, looking at them
Mm-hmm.
on both sides or on both sides of the theater. You don't know how much that may affect you.
Yeah, no, you don't.
And
One
art
of,
does that, by the way. Yeah.
One of the interesting things, as I graduated from high school and went away to college at KU, in the summers I came back to Dodge to work.
Mm-hmm.
And one summer, they asked me and a couple of my colleagues if we would not dance for the tourists at the Boot Hill replica.
Mm-hmm.
They bulldozed the front street in Dodge,
Mm-hmm.
made it into a parking lot. Does that sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
And then decided a few years later that they needed a front street replica, so they
So they bulldozed the original so they could put a
Right.
replica?
Well, we did it here in Tucson. We built a community center. We bulldozed the old barrio and
Yeah.
and that. But what was interesting, we put on. There were four of us. We put on shows, and I had acquired Eagle Scout. And if you are an Eagle Scout, you can wear a chief's headdress.
Mm.
So I built my own chief's headdress
Mm-hmm.
with real eagle feathers.
Mm.
And I lucked out because I had an aunt, my mother's oldest sister, who homesteaded in Ketchikan, Alaska.
Mm.
And she had eagles all over the place.
Yeah.
And occasionally one or two would die.
Yeah.
And she'd get the feathers out
Yeah.
of it and send it to me.
As we know now in the world of Native American art, these are illegal and you may not have them, nor may you have the war bonnets or any of that. Unless you're Native American, you can still do those things. But this was back in the early 60s, late 50s?
Yeah, late 50s,
Late
early
50s.
1960,
Yeah,
that
things
thing.
were a little bit different.
But when I went away to college, my mother went through my stuff
Yeah.
and actually gave it away.
Yeah.
I think my headdress went to the Salvation Army or something.
Then ended up in some museum as a Native American made
Probably.
piece. So you danced for
Mhm.
for the tourist it was?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was. And again,
And these were authentic Native American dances that you had learned
that's
from the
correct.
Pawnee.
And yes, and actually Woody Krembo was involved in the design of it. Now they were designed as theater presentations,
The dances.
the dances, because we would dance, give it a name. Well, let's take one, the ghost dance.
Yeah.
All right. We did the ghost dance. We had special costumes we made, and it was set up in a theater setting so that we danced. The lights would go out, and we had underneath our tops. We took the tops off. We had white sheets,
Mm-hmm.
and then they turned a black light on us. So we got up. We suddenly appeared like a ghost.
Yeah, some people might think a different thing with the white sheets.
I know.
We'll assume it looked more like a ghost.
Yes.
Yeah, so
So it was all kind of a theatrical kind
Yeah.
of thing. We had teepees, canvas teepees that we painted and had set out in front of the replica front
Yeah.
street, and had a lot of fun. We were actually the Front Street Replica, which is a not-for-profit group, still exists today, made donations to the Boy Scouts.
and this was for the scouts that they were doing all
Yeah.
this. And so how long did you continue to do the
2
dances?
summers.
So you danced for 2 summers
Right.
during
And
your college?
During
These
my
were-
college
yeah.
years.
Uh-huh.
It occurred in the evening, so I could work a regular
Yeah.
job. And one of the most interesting things is a film crew from the British television showed up.
Mm.
And so I decided to do the snake dance,
Hopi snake.
Hopi snake dance,
Okay.
yes. But not with real rattlesnakes.
Yeah,
In Kansas, we have large bull snakes.
yeah.
And I had trained them. They were, you play with them a while and
Yeah, they
rub them
yeah.
and they
Yeah, they're fine.
relax and everything.
Yeah.
But when I got up, started dancing with them, the bright lights in those days, they had to have bright lights,
Yeah.
to film. The snakes just froze like a piece of, like a frozen stick.
Right.
I couldn't get them to wrap around my arm or thing.
Right.
So, anyway,
So somewhere out there's old footage of you
right.
as a. Wait, did you have your full headdress
Oh,
on?
yes,
Oh yeah, the whole
absolutely.
regalia.
Yeah, whole regalia.
I don't. What do you think would be how this would be interpreted in today's world?
Ooh, that is a great
Yeah.
question. And in fact, I talked to Michael Ettema about that because apparently last year the Lahanta Kosharis were approached by several tribes saying, we don't think you should do this anymore. And I said that was really sad because that troop kept the culture of Native Americans alive during those times. Yeah, the whole world has changed.
Right.
We now have powwows that people can go to and participate
Right.
in. So I don't know what their final decision was.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a thing that was raised by the Indians
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah, I could see it though.
And I think they should honor the Koshari Indians and actually participate in their teaching of the Boy Scouts there.
Yeah, well, maybe they will. Maybe they'll take
Yeah,
a
maybe.
more active role.
Yeah.
I can see where they would come from on that end, saying, "Well, this is our culture. This is our thing. You know, we want to portray it, not you." I could see that. You know.
Yep.
And I think if you twisted it like the Hopi snake dance, I'm sure that wouldn't go over at all. So it's interesting to see how mores change, I think, in this country over time. And it's continuing to change. Sometimes I think it's really is for the better, and sometimes I wonder if we push the level of that correctness. I know that Emily Carr painting, which was called Indian House, which is in the Ontario Art Museum, just changed the name from Indian painting to something else because they didn't feel it was politically correct. And they actually changed the 1929 painting that she had done to a different name. So, you know, where we're pushing it, I don't know. But it's interesting to see and hear from someone who was in that era that really loved Native American art, influenced you. It sounds like pretty much it was the cornerstone to why you love what you do.
Absolutely, Mark. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's nothing more exciting to me than to be at the Pawnee Powwow at night, and you're sound asleep, looking at the stars, you know, clear as crystal. You can still see the Milky Way,
Right.
and hear the thunder drum in the distance.
Yeah.
Because some of the clans were getting together individually
Yeah.
and dancing way until 2 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning, something like that.
And so that impetus when you were a kid formed the basis for a collection, which you've collected, not only Plains Indians, but every variety, and also to become basically an authoritarian, no, well, maybe he is, authority on different Native things. Yeah, well, you have a great knowledge and you give lectures and different things. So, and I want to discuss that, but I want to get to the next level where you go in your life. So you graduate from KU.
That's University of Kansas, by
University
the way,
of
not
Kansas.
Kentucky.
Yeah, okay, University of Kansas. Jayhawks, right? Is that right?
Right, yeah. That's right.
Go Jayhawks. And then you go to France, too, right? When does that happen?
Yes, well, that actually happened while I was at KU.
Yeah, okay. Tell us about
I
that.
applied for a junior year abroad program.
Yeah.
I had come to a point, I was going to be a scientist or go into medicine, one or the other.
Yeah, well, you did, kind of.
Because the world is strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
I all through high school, I was fascinated with, I became an amateur radio operator, electronics, loved, and chemistry. I have a chemistry lab packed away.
You can give that away now. It's okay.
So I love chemistry.
Right.
And so I was going to be a chemical researcher or
Right.
work in medical profession or something like that. But I realized by my second year at University of Kansas, I didn't have the math skills. Loved organic chemistry. I got A's in organic, but the math was killing me. So I decided to have a career change. And I had applied for this job, didn't think I would get it. It was a new program called Junior Year Abroad. It was actually more than a year. It was actually full 18 months. And it was to go to Paris and be a part of the Sorbonne. And I had a 6-month orientation down in southern France at the University of Aix-en-Provence. And that's where all the foreign students were brought together. And although I'd had a little background in French, this was the real world. And so we spent 6 months there learning vocational kinds of things, learning French culture. And then we were returned to Paris and the Sorbonne. and we were then integrated into the regular classes.
And what did you do there?
That was a life-changing event
Yeah.
for me.
And what kind of classes were you taking at that time?
Mostly French culture,
Yeah.
but linguistic classes,
Ah.
pronunciation,
Right.
all kinds of things. How do you say, what are the colloquialisms for this, and
Right.
that.
And of course, art was intertwined in that somehow.
It was.
Right. It had to be. It's
and
French
it was
culture.
so neat to talk about famous French artists, even during the period of the royalty, and then walk a couple of blocks down the street and actually see it.
Mm-hmm.
That was incredible with your professor.
And so that was almost a year and a half that
Year
you
and
did
a
it?
half, yeah.
Yeah. And so that changed the way you saw the world.
That's right.
This little kid from Kansas now is seeing a different, huge city. Was that the biggest city, Paris, you'd ever been to?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, by far, right?
Yeah.
And so that stuck with you and continues to stick with you. I know you go to Paris on a regular basis
Absolutely.
in France, right?
Yeah. And the French have this artistic gene. Wherever it is, you find it in postcards
Mm-hmm.
that they sell on the street.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
And
An appreciation of art maybe that we don't see in this country.
exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and even though being affected by this art in France, your main interest was Native American art.
That's right.
From a collecting standpoint.
And it is interesting, Mark, and I didn't find this until about 3 years ago. Have you ever heard of the I think it's Navajo artist, John Nieto?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, did you know John was at the Sorbonne the same time
No, I
I
didn't.
was?
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He was studying art there.
Oh, he's still around.
And Cezanne, he said Cezanne changed his life.
Yeah, well, he loves color in his paintings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can see it. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Have you gotten a chance to talk to?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked usually every summer that I go with you to Santa Fe.
Yeah.
I usually attend his opening there on Canyon Road.
Oh, very nice.
And I catch him a little, period of time when we talk about, of course, it's now talking about, you're still standing up and walking,
So
you're alive.
You guys were at the same time at the Sorbonne.
That's correct.
Wow, that's interesting as can be.
He was in a different program.
Yeah.
But, and I don't think I think he told me he was there for 6 to 8 months. He wasn't there.
Did it change? Well, clearly it changed.
Changed his whole way of
the way he
looking
looks at things.
At
yeah.
art.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can see that now that you've mentioned that. I didn't ever know that. But you came back to America,
Mm-hmm.
and you graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what year was that approximately?
Probably 66.
Yeah. So Vietnam War is going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, really starting to get cooking, and you're out of college.
I'm out of college, and I started summer school for a business degree.
Mhm.
I thought I'd get a master's in business.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to outwait the Vietnam War.
Yeah, because if you were in school, then you could get a deferment.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then I thought, no, I need to get out. I don't know what I'm going to do in life.
Mm.
So, a good friend of mine in Dodge said, well, I just need to tell you, you're number one on the draft board.
And so, how did he know that?
Because he worked in the office there.
Oh, and they had picked the numbers, but they hadn't let them out publicly yet?
That's correct.
Yeah, so you're dead meat. So for those who don't know about the draft board back in those days and during the Vietnam, they had numbers that they would pick out, 1 to 365, I guess.
Right.
And, you would pick those numbers would affect how you were going to be selected. So
Right.
if you were number 1, if you were number 100, you were going.
Right. Well, the other thing too, Mark, Southwest Kansas, primarily agriculture.
Right.
They were giving deferments to a lot of people from college going back and farming.
Yes.
So I was a city boy,
Yeah.
Dodge City.
Yeah. So you knew you were toast.
Yeah.
Unless you got a deferment in school and you weren't exactly sure what you wanted to do.
That's correct.
So you signed up.
What I did, I decided, do I want to crawl through the swamps of Vietnam,
Yeah.
or do I want to fly over Vietnam?
Yeah.
And I decided, I think I'll fly over Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so I joined the United States Air Force.
Yeah. And you guys always had the best BOQs, I must say.
Yeah.
And were you, because you had graduated, right?
Right.
So were you an officer?
I started out enlisted, but I switched over
Yeah.
later on.
Yeah.
And And one of the interesting things when I completed my training, my initial training,
Mm-hmm.
they said, well, you guys are all going to Nam, but you airmen, you're going to go to Tucson, Arizona. And the downside that it's a 4-year commitment in Tucson.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, how lucky could I be? Because the rest of these guys were young kids who were 19, 20 years old. I was 24
Yeah.
by then.
Right.
And I didn't need to run around the world.
Yes.
And so they sent me to Vietnam. So I began serving on a combat crew
Uh-huh.
with the Titan IIs that were stationed here in
Yeah.
Tucson.
So they gave you that choice. They actually gave you a choice as
Well,
long
I
as you
had-
would do 4 years.
I signed up. I was committed to 4 years.
Yeah.
Air Force. If I was drafted, it was a 2-year commitment.
I see.
If you signed up in the other division, Navy or whatever, it
Right.
was a 4-year commitment.
Right.
So I knew I had 4 years.
Yeah.
And so I thought, wow, how did I luck out?
Yeah.
And so I came here. I did my 4 years here. Absolutely loved it because I was able to get out. I was on crew duty for about 36 hours. Then we're off for 2 or 3 days. Then back on combat crew duty.
And these were in the Titan missile silos.
Yes.
So let people know about that. Most people don't even know what this means. But it's, a product of our nuclear age.
That's right. It was the world's largest nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
And they were stationed in Tucson,
Yep.
Wichita, Kansas, and Little Rock, Arkansas.
And you didn't have a choice of where you could pick.
Actually, I did, but I didn't think I would get it. I didn't want to go to Wichita, and I didn't want to go to Little Rock.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to Tucson
Good
because
choice.
that was the West.
Yeah.
And I loved the West.
Yeah. And was that again maybe because there was more Native American?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
I wanted to come back to the West where there were Native. When I grew up in Dodge, there were no Native Americans in that Southwest or Western Kansas.
Right.
And that was because actually Western Kansas was buffalo country. And so the Southern Cheyenne were in around, but they were not camped around.
Mm-hmm.
They were hunting buffalo. The Kiowa would come up and the Comanches would come up into the Dodge City region hunting buffalo, but they never spent permanent camps there at all, temporary camps. So there were never Indians. There were lots of arrowheads that I found and flint scrapers and things like that along the Arkansas River.
So you looked at it as a opportunity to, to roam the desert, see native culture, and then sit in a silo with a big nuclear bomb next to you for how long? I mean, I've got to get into your mind about what that was like. So you have,
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, because that's, first of all, they don't just select anybody.
No.
So you had to go through some kind of rigorous course, I hope.
Major screening.
Yeah. And what were they screening for?
Well, first of all, they wanted to test your reliability. The FBI probably interviewed at least more than a dozen people that I had been around, grew up with. And they asked you to put down 4 names, but they only used those 4 names to go to people who they got other names from.
Yeah, those are the more reliable ones, probably, because the 4 you put down are too close to you, and they want to get the ones that are...
I didn't understand that.
Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
Suddenly, people would call me occasionally and say, there was a guy who came from the FBI asking questions about you. And I go, wow, how did they get that name?
Yeah.
So, we had to go through really very thorough and testing and that sort of stuff.
Right. And what kind of testing was it? Do you remember?
Oh, God, everything.
Like reflexes and those kind of things?
Yeah.
And did they try anything to find out how you would handle under a bad situation?
Oh, yeah. We had that all the time.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, it's just like learning to fly a fighter plane or an aircraft of some kind. They have these very sophisticated trainers. And they, you have to go through training every so often. We had, I think, 10 hours of training on the missile procedures trainer. That's what they called it. 10 hours every month. So we had to spend at least 10 hours, probably in 3-hour segments. And all they did was throw us all kinds of problems. And we, as a crew, had to solve those problems.
And how many were in a crew?
4.
And you knew these guys. By this point, you knew them very well, right? Because you eat, sleep, stay with them.
Guess what my crew number was? 007.
Oh, that's funny. I'll remember that. I can use that in the future. Hey, 007, Jerry.
You know, it sounds cool, except everybody makes fun of it.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
and of course, oh, we have 007 crew today. Well, we'll expect really great things.
Yeah,
out of
I'm
you.
sure. Yeah.
You know, and you go, oh God.
And
no.
so when you go down that tube, right? That's what it was.
Actually, an elevator.
An
yes.
elevator. And how many floors below?
Three
below the surface.
Three
of-
floors.
and so you have living quarters down there,
Mm-hmm.
and they close up I guess once you go in it, there's no light coming in. There's no nothing, right? You're in
Wait a minute.
when you go down to the Titan Missile
Yeah.
area.
Well, we have lights all the way.
I don't mean fluorescent lights. I
Oh.
mean sunlight.
Oh, yeah. No
Right?
sunlight.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like they cap the thing and you're.
That's right.
Yep, and you're in it. And I mean, because this wasn't that long after the Cuban Missile Crisis, right?
That's not. I just thank God I wasn't around
Yeah.
on duty for the Cuban Missile
Yeah,
Crisis.
because this is only a couple years after that, right?
That's
3
correct.
maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that was recent history, I'm sure, and you were aware of what went on at that time. Did you understand what was going on at that time, what had
Sort
happened?
of, but I'll tell you, it's not until the last 5 or 6 years
Yeah.
that I learned even more detail, which was even more scary.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing how close we came.
And you would have been one of those guys, right?
Yep.
They say, okay. And so if you got that word to launch, you launch, right?
You bet.
And there's nothing that changes that, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And did you have nightmares about that?
I did right at first, but the nightmares weren't so much launching the missile as it was later along. You know, we talked, crews. You know, what if we do launch it? What do we do? You know, we've got rations for a couple of months down
Right.
here, but what's it going to be like up topside? You know.
Yeah. And you can't get out either, really,
Well,
can
we
you?
could, yes.
But you wouldn't want to.
Well, you know,
And did they go through those scenarios with you if you have to launch, what you're supposed to do and all that?
no.
They just hoped it never happened.
Yeah.
But
It
you
was
guys
a
had to
detour.
think about it.
We had to think about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That's a big time pressure
It is.
for a
And then-
24-year-old kid.
Then it wasn't very long, Mark, that I realized the problem wasn't the nuclear weapon or the Russians, so to speak. It was the maintenance crews.
Why is that?
Well, any day we had probably 15 to 20 or 30 maintenance crews coming in, and I was in charge of those. I had full responsibility for
So
them.
you had to make sure that they were doing just maintenance and nothing else.
Yeah, and making sure that if they moved their position in, remember, this is the same missile used in the Gemini space program. It was the Titan II, except instead of a space capsule, we had a nuclear weapon on top of it. I used to have nightmares about that because crew wouldn't report in. So I'd have to get on the microphone and broadcast throughout the silo. The silo is 9 stories deep.
Wow.
So, and the missile is liquid propellant. So it's unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide. It's hypergolic. That means the two come together, it explodes. But if you kept it at 58 degrees, it was pretty stable as a liquid. So
I bet it stayed cold in there all the
it
time.
did. We all had our.
Is it a little hot in here? Is it a little hot in here?
We all had our flight jackets we wore, particularly
Yeah.
at night. You know, when the maintenance troops were gone and the air conditioning
Right.
got really tense and that sort of thing.
So that was critical because if it
Yeah.
didn't, if it got to a certain temperature, and we're talking Tucson, Arizona,
Right.
that it could ignite,
Right.
and then you got a big splat.
Yep. And I mean, we had all kinds of buzzers and things if it got above 58. The tolerance.
And did those buzzers ever go off?
Occasionally they would, you know, right when I was sleeping, you know.
Yeah.
We had crew changes, you know, two on the launch control level, and then we had sleeping quarters upstairs.
And you have the actual big missile there too, right? You can actually, yeah, right? I mean, it's like you're walking around it, right?
Yeah, but we have a launch control, from the launch control console, we had a walkway
Mhm.
to the missile silo.
I
So
see.
it wasn't exactly right next to it.
Yes. But you probably had to check on it daily
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
and hope a pack rat didn't somehow get
Yep.
in.
No, we checked on it
Which
twice.
I could see would be a problem
Yeah,
and
we-
could happen in
We
Tucson,
checked
Arizona.
it twice a day.
Yeah.
What we call shift verification. And you had certain things you looked at.
Yeah.
And you had crew changeover. That you also checked it at crew changeover.
And so they undoubtedly did false drills occasionally
Mhm.
to see how you would react. And what was that like when those must have occurred? And how often did they do them?
Well, they could be, usually they did them once a quarter.
Yeah.
And, each missile wing did their own thing.
Right.
But we had usually once a quarter. And then any time the inspector general would show up,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you had anything like that in the Navy, but, the inspector general can show up at any time in any base in anything and say, all right, let's see you perform.
Yeah.
And
I would
you
say
can-
bend over. I think we need to do a
Yeah,
prostate
yeah,
exam.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we didn't have that, I don't
Yeah,
think.
okay. We did.
And so he
And
would.
actually, the most boring job, it was required flight surgeons
Yeah.
to spend 24 hours with us.
Oh,
in missile.
God. That must have been torture for them.
Yeah. Well, they had to do it once a quarter.
Oh, okay.
So, but they were totally bored. So,
Oh, yeah. They want to be up
they'd sit down
flying
and play poker or whatever.
and let you run it. So when they'd have these drills, did you know they were drills or did you not know they were drills?
That was the really neat thing because you had to go through, you'd get the warble tone, which gets your attention,
Mhm.
doodle, 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 doo,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. This is drop kick with a launch message. Ooh, Alpha Romero. You start, and here's what I loved about it: high tech, low tech.
Hmm.
We had the highest tech you could think of
For that time. Yeah.
for that time, and yet we had a grease pencil and a piece of plastic.
Hmm.
Alpha Romero. We would write these down.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'd go to the safe, unlock the safe, pull it out, and see if that message authenticated.
Hope your handwriting was good.
Yeah.
In fact, your handwriting isn't that good, by the
Well,
way.
one of the authentications was,
Yeah.
this is a test.
Yeah.
All right. And you go,
Yeah, because you just didn't know until you opened it up and checked. And if those codes matched, was it just two codes, Alfa Romeo, or was it a line?
oh,
of,
no, there's,
Yeah, it's a huge line. I would hope so. It doesn't seem like a very
Yeah.
good system if it's Alfa Romeo. Oh, no, that was the car I was talking about. Sorry.
right.
Fire.
Yeah.
So did you do that job for 4 years?
4 years. Well, actually, I had almost a year in training,
Yeah.
in terms of that at Wichita Falls, Texas.
Hmm.
Then they sent us to Vandenberg Air Force Base. And that's where we actually got into the actual silos and had experience. Vandenberg in those days was used for R&D.
Hmm.
And so they would actually be firing Titan IIs down the Pacific Test Range,
Hmm.
Researching whatever they were.
And did you get to see those fire?
Yes.
Yeah, I would think
Yeah.
that would be important.
Yeah.
And I would think a big deal would be to make sure you're not claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Because if
That's
you,
part of the
yeah.
that's part of the screening process.
Yes, because if you and so having done that, do you have any claustrophobia since then?
Never
None.
have.
You
I never
had.
did as a kid.
Yeah.
I was a spelunker
Yeah, me
here
too.
in Tucson, and I just loved these little caves that you'd wiggle
Yeah, it
into.
didn't bother. Yeah.
Yeah, so it never bothered me.
Yeah, it was the same way.
But that was really interesting to see this missile take off, come out of the silo,
Oh, yeah, I can
and go down
imagine.
the Pacific Test Range.
And it had a different meaning when you were in that because you knew
yeah.
what it looked like visually in your mind. You'd seen it,
You bet.
and
Well, in the launch control center, you've got not a color, but a black and white TV that's monitoring the silo as it comes out. Great
Right.
big 5-ton, I think it was steel and concrete door, slides back. The engine fires. It fires inside the silo. So you've got this volume of actually steam and smoke coming out in a V shape,
mm-hmm,
and the missile slowly rises.
seen those
in the
images.
sand, and it's turning slightly.
mm-hmm, I've seen that too.
Because the guidance system has to find the North Star.
Hmm.
Now, it used to be top secret. but it's not anymore.
We won't have to kill you now, then.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. In fact, those silos now are like homes, right? They've sold them
some
off.
of them. Those are the old. Not that I don't know. Usually it was the anti-aircraft.
Yeah, because they did
missiles.
sell those things off. I know for
Yeah.
people that could buy them as home sites.
Right.
But you don't know about the ones that were in Tucson. They're
Well, actually,
defunct, I'm
interesting
assuming, I
enough,
hope.
Kit Peak was very interested. In fact, I was on duty when their folks came out to take a look at the silo as a possible research.
Mhm.
They wanted to bounce lasers off in the bottom and so forth.
When did they close those silos? When did that go away?
I think it was 75,
Yeah.
76.
Okay. But from 66 to 70, you were in that.
Yeah,
You were
I
associated.
got out
with
in
it.
70.
And was that a happy day when you got to go away from the
It
silos?
was a great day. You know, I didn't know what the hell I was going to do, but in life, you know, I'm trying to think. So where is my skills for 4 years in the Navy,
Air Force.
Air Force?
Yeah.
Not
Your
Navy.
skills in the Navy were none, I can tell you. But the Air Force were pretty much
One of my
too.
rewards was to go to the Naval Air Station there, North Island there in California.
Yep. Been there.
And got to go on a fishing trip with the Navy boys.
Oh, yeah, very good. So when you graduated, so you're now about 29, because
You're right on
right in
target.
that time frame. And you've had 4 years of training of something that isn't applicable for the outside world, other than you can handle stress and pressure. That's one thing you do know you can handle through the terror of the night. You maybe not, but do you still have nightmares from that, by the way?
Actually, I don't.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it means you have an interesting
but
brain.
If later on they had some major problems, certainly Little Rock, Arkansas, and it's just come out in the last couple of years. One of the silos blew up.
Oh, I didn't know about this.
Yeah, and it was because from actually 72 on, the Titan IIs were antiquated because they had Polaris missiles and submarines that ran around the world, and so these fixed things were not that important anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the United States government wanted to keep them operational so they could use them in negotiating with the Russians. So they wanted to put very, very little money into maintaining them.
That's when we used to negotiate with the Russians, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Times have changed.
Times have changed. So what did happen? I digress. Sorry.
So what happened is that the missiles started to slowly deteriorate.
Yes.
And problems began to develop.
Yeah.
And and this was one of the nightmares. One of the repair guys on the second level didn't secure his wrench. So it fell about 4 stories, hit the launch duct wall, bounced into the side of the missile, and ripped a big hole in it. And so fuel started coming out, and the oxidizer sprung a leak. So we've got these 2 things starting to fill up inside the silo. Well, there are emergency procedures to go to.
Yeah, get me out of here.
But
that's number 1. Elevator, please.
But, and this is where I do not understand, the wing commander, the crew panicked.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
They said, we went out of here.
Yeah.
And the wing commander said, okay. So they evacuated the crew.
Oh, yeah, they can't do that. They actually have to do something.
What they found out,
Yeah.
once the crew's out there, they said, okay, so how do we monitor this thing? They couldn't.
Yeah, no.
So all they could do was sit and wait
For it to pop.
for it to pop. And finally at 2:20 a.m. in the morning, it blew its stack.
And so was that a nuclear disaster too? I mean, it was actually a bomb that went off?
Yeah.
Because you don't hear about this.
Yeah, no, you don't. It was a nuclear accident, not a nuclear disaster. And in that definition, you see, and it's still top secret.
So why the hell are we talking about this?
Our weapons systems.
We're off today. Thank you. This is it for the Art Dealer Diaries.
Our weapons today are designed to fail safe.
Yeah.
So they're not. There are a number of absolute requirements that have
redundant.
to go.
issues that you can
that
get
have
up.
to have to accomplish before a nuclear warhead will go off. And of course it wasn't even, they didn't get to stage 1 on it. But within that nuclear warhead are destruct packages. I think it's something like TNT or dynamite that's put into it. So the dynamite went off. And what it did, fortunately, it all came down, exploded, and the radiation and nuclear parts of the bomb all landed in kind of an area about the size of the gallery here. And
Huge area then.
Yeah. Well, it could have been all over.
Yeah. And so this was in near Little Rock?
Yeah, not far from Little Rock.
What year was that? 74-ish something?
Probably, 75.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So those guys were probably a little screwed up mentally after that.
Yeah, well, two airmen died.
And how is that? I thought they evacuated.
They did. But then they got the idea. In between the access port and the silo is a monitoring device up there, big meters and stuff. So they decided to put on their rocket suits and go in and see if they could read any of the indicators. They didn't want to go into the silo. And in the process, their rocket chutes were so old that they were ripped down here, and the fumes got into them, and it's basically the nitrogen tetroxide just
asphyxiated them.
Yeah, took them away just like
wow.
that. So there were 2 people that died into it. The wing commander got canned, which he should have.
Yeah.
Because he should have never. The safest place in the world was in the Launch Control Center.
Yeah, that's true. Nothing's going to happen there, right?
It had 1, 2, 3, 4 2-ton blast doors to protect it.
Yeah.
And it sat on springs. The Launch Control Center was set on springs inside of a dome, of a concrete dome.
That would have been a hell of a place to be when that went off, though.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what it would be
and
like.
at night, can you imagine what it looked like?
Yeah.
At night. So, but anyway.
And when did you find out? So did you hear about that when it happened in the 70s, or that just came out?
No, that
was. I'm sure that got hushed up.
I knew there were stories about some problems, and a couple of problems we were used in our briefings, but the explosion did not happen. I mean, it happened long after I'd left the Air Force. But that was kept pretty quiet.
Sure.
The local law enforcement people and paramedics and stuff knew about it, but they didn't know the whole detail about it. And it wasn't until this guy wrote this book, Command and Control, that came out about 4 years ago, that we have all the inside information.
And so that's kind of where you learned about it, really?
That's where I learned the details.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned that the wing commander gave permission for the combat crew to leave the silo. They're the only ones that had control or could monitor and report topside as to what was going on.
Well, it sounds like they didn't really, even though they try to do all this training and preparation, part of training and preparation is trying to think of really what are the bad outcomes, and you have to plan for those.
Sure.
Because, it's easy enough to plan for when it goes off and everything is, destroyed, but what happens if it's not a planned event and you have a wrench that falls?
That's right.
Why aren't wrenches locked in with
they're supposed to
with
be.
Something? Yeah. So
and that's what caused my nightmares when I was there. I never knew if they were. I couldn't supervise them. They had their own supervisor, but it's easy to go in and say, well, look, I can use this wrench over here that's not required. It'll do just as good.
Yep.
You can kludge the system. That was the word we used.
Yeah.
You can kind of put a wrench over here or put a screwdriver here and make it work, that kind of thing.
So you survived the missile years.
Yeah, survived the missile.
And then, so what did you do after that? So you're 29 now.
I had no idea what I was going to do. I was trying to think what skills I had, and I thought, well, how many companies need a person who's skilled in launching a nuclear weapon?
Russia, and other than that,
And so I went down to the University of Arizona in their employment place and started interviewing for jobs there. One was at TEP, who's on electric power. It looked kind of interesting. Then there was this one that came up at Tucson Medical Center. They were looking for someone on a director level to set up a whole new kind of division for the hospital called an education director.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that seemed intriguing. And the reason it was because the last year in the missile silo, I had been assigned to training. So I was actually training new combat crews coming in,
Mm-hmm.
Giving the inside info, that sort of thing on how to operate these damn things. And I thought, can my skills in training transfer to the medical profession?
Right. And so they did, apparently.
And it did. I found...
And that was with TMC.
That was Tucson Medical Center. And so I had the greatest boss in the world, Don Shropshire.
Yep.
And then he had a sidekick by the name of Dr. Darrell Thorpe, who
Yep.
you know very well.
Mm-hmm. Had a class under him, best class I ever had.
And I spent 30 years at Tucson Medical Center. And
Which is where I met you.
that's where we met.
We might as well talk about that.
Okay.
So I'm working for Darrell. I'm shadowing him because I thought, well, maybe I want to see what it's like to be a CEO of a big medical hospital, and was able to arrange this in my residency to be able to do that. He was kind enough to say, yeah, come around. And so I did that. I learned that, wow, what a tough job. Don't want that job ever. And but the great thing was, Gerald said, because I was telling him about, my love of Native American art and Indian material, and he says, oh, somebody else has that, Jerry. He works right here. He works for me. And so I went and saw you, and you can pick it up from there.
Well, Darrell said, there's this young doc who's here at TMC doing a residency in administration, and he's a collector of Native American art. And I go, wow, because I had a hard time finding people really
Like minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we met and we talked about getting together, and I think I even invited you and Kathleen out to my house.
Yeah, we went out there.
And never missing a good opportunity to sell something.
Yeah.
You brought a blanket and a pot.
I remember. I think I made a sale too, if I remember.
Yeah, I think I love both of them, but I
Yeah.
did buy the pot. It
Yeah.
was and I remember it was a beautiful Acoma pot
Yeah.
from the 1930s.
Yeah.
And I still have it, by the way.
Yeah, very good.
But at that point on, and then you indicated when you finished, I think you did employee physicals around companies and
Yeah, occupational med, and then
Yeah.
I got offered the job with the Phoenix Suns group to
Right.
do that, and that's when I said, screw it, I'm going to become a art dealer.
Right.
Because if I go down that road, I'm down that road for
Well, I remember you calling me up and said, I'm opening a gallery.
Yep, that was right after I
And-
turned down that position.
And I said, oh, well, I got to come down and see it.
Yeah.
And it was like a magnet. I'd be in here every other week, just checking things out. And Mark, you would pull things out and show me, and I go, oh my God, I've never seen anything quite like that. So you ended up getting some really incredible stuff. And then the day came when you kind of feel it in your bones, probably time to retire. And all hell was breaking loose. Don Shropshire had retired, and they were thinking about merging Tucson Medical Center with Samaritan in Phoenix. And it was a nightmare.
Good exit strategy,
Yeah,
Tom.
and so I'd come down and I'd bitch and moan to you about the hospital business. And one day you looked at me and said, why don't you work for me?
Yeah.
And I thought, that's interesting. So actually, I filled out a form to work for you before I'd even resigned.
Oh,
at
I
the
didn't know that.
hospital.
That's funny.
Lisa was the one who I filled the form out
That's
for.
very funny.
And I was still working at TMC. But within 2 weeks,
That was over 20 years ago, by the way, folks.
yeah, within 2 weeks, I had my resignation in
Yeah.
and said adios. But the hospital is still a great place.
Yeah, you
New
still
people
do a
have
lot of
come
things
in,
with it.
And it's
You've
not
helped
for-
develop an art program there, so
Right.
they're putting lots of wonderful art into the hospital and all the rooms and all the areas, which
And
is really
you and Kathleen have been marvelous in donating pieces from the gallery.
well. It's important, I remember, the only real art that I ever saw as a doctor in a hospital was the town I grew up in Portales, and the
Portales.
hospital had Peter Hurd's, original
wow.
Peter
I didn't
Hurd's.
know that.
Yeah, they did. I don't know how they ended up with him, but he was from not too far from Roswell area, and
Sure.
somehow they ended up with a bunch of it. And I remember going into and I didn't know anything about values or anything
Sure.
about anything. I just know that I responded to the art and remember going into different rooms to look at all the different paintings. So I know it makes a difference. And of course, now it makes a huge difference when you're a patient, I think, to have those.
Sure.
And so you've been instrumental in getting Tucson Medical Center to have really a world-class program now.
Absolutely, and by the way, it's going to be on Arizona Illustrated sometime in the fall.
Yeah, very
They
good.
just filmed it today.
Wow.
Videotaped it today. But it was, when you work for an organization long enough, you can become their resident historian.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I've involved into.
Nice.
And one of the things that I remember is the founders of the Desert Sand in 1924, and later on, in 1943, had been huge collectors of Dutch art. And they were into 27 pieces. Alfred and Anna Erickson, who lived in New York City, began collecting Dutch art, and they're a big piece. When Anna Erickson died in 1961, by the way, she lived in the winters at Tucson Medical Center. We still have their home there on the grounds. Their art collection went up for auction in 1961, and it brought over $7 million.
Wow.
And their prime piece was Aristotle contemplating the bust of Homer,
Yes.
which is by Rembrandt. And it's important because Rembrandt painted himself into the picture as Aristotle. And it's in the Metropolitan Museum in New York City.
It used to be sitting over on Grant Road.
Now, don't I wish? But there's a book out called Chasing Rembrandt. And in there is a story about the Ericksons not only buying it. Here's the interesting thing. Alfred Erickson, in 1928, puts it up for sale to, and I can't think of his name, he was a huge broker in London. I'm trying to think of his name now.
This is the painting, the Aristotle painting?
Yes. He puts it up, officially sells it to this art dealer in London. 3 years later, he buys it back.
Yeah, Depression happened.
Yep. But somehow he wanted money all of a sudden. Now, but it wasn't for the businesses. I think it was for the Institute of Research at Tucson Medical, or at Desert Sand.
So you think when he sold it in 28, that was...
I think he put it up for collateral and
Yes.
got the money.
I
Now,
see.
I'm still researching this.
But did he get the painting back? Did he actually?
Yes,
he
he
did get
did.
it back. Yeah.
So they had it available for auction in 1961.
Yeah. Wow.
But I look at that, and I wish I could think of the name of the artist or the broker in London. Very well known. But why did he sell it to him, then turn around and buy it back?
Well, a lot of things happened. The Depression, and he may have bought it back at a price that was half as much, or maybe even.
Well, the indication
Less
is
than that.
not. He actually paid more for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
See, this is what I think he wanted money because he was right in the midst of.
He almost
Building-
maybe he just kind of pawned it. Well, the other thing is, if you think about it in that time frame, the dealer buys it, but may not be able to sell it so easily because people don't want to buy art. It's the Depression. This guy still is interested in it, has second thoughts about why he sold it anyway. He took care of whatever he had to take care of, comes back and says, I want it back now, I'll buy it. And he says, the dealer, of course, being smart, goes, sure, I'll sell it to you, but a little bit more.
Yeah.
And makes a profit and gets it back. And then
And your scenario could very well be
makes
correct.
sense. From
But I'm looking at, he's got a big investment at the Desert Sand, which is Tucson Medical Center, in the Institute of Research. And they were researching tuberculosis.
Yeah, which is what Tucson was really a haven
That's
for.
right. Absolutely.
What we used to call consumption. This is where everybody went
Yep.
because it was dry and hot, and that tuberculum did not do well under those conditions, which means patients did. So it was why.
By the way, all this providence is available through the Metropolitan Museum, the provenance for the painting.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah. They've got the provenance since Rembrandt painted it all the way down to Alfred and Anna Erickson, and then the sale to the Metropolitan. But in the book Chasing Rembrandt, the Metropolitan just about went bankrupt. They knew they had to have it.
Yeah, wow.
And from that point on, the board at the Metropolitan said, we're not going to use our money. If we don't have pledged money, then we can't buy it.
Yeah, oh, that's interesting. I'll have to check out that book. Sounds like a great book.
Yeah.
And has meaning right here to Tucson, Arizona.
Absolutely, yeah.
Believe it or not, we've already gone past an hour. It goes that fast. And we haven't even got to the good stuff.
Right.
So we may have to have you come back and talk about Chin Lee and all the
Oh, my
wide
goodness.
ruins and all the other things that I know that our listeners would want to hear. So, Jerry, thank you so much. Now, I was going to say go ahead and get back to work, but it's your off day and you came in.
Off day.
That means I don't have to pay you, right? That's awesome. This is a great day. Thank you so much. It's really, I learned something, and that's what I always hope is I come away with something that I didn't know, and wow, I learned a lot about.
Maybe if we do next time, we can talk more about the Arizona Historical Society
and
the Western Art Patrons and the Tucson Museum of Art.
Yeah, no, there's all sorts of stuff.
Trips up to the Four Corners.
Stay tuned, people. We've got another one coming. I don't know when.
But I've learned a lot in the years I worked for you. I've ton of stuff.
Yeah, well, thank you. We that's the goal, is to keep learning.
Yep.
That's why we're doing the podcast. Yeah.
Remember, the first thing I said was, I've got great ideas to market stuff. Mm-hmm. You said, that ain't the problem. The problem is getting the stuff.
And it still is.
It still is, yeah.
Thank you very much for being on my podcast, Our Dealer Diaries, Jerry Freund. You're a fantastic guy, and I'm happy to say you're my friend as well as my friend. And
it's been a delight working here.
Thank you. We'll talk again.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Brought to you by Medicine Man Gallery, located for over 26 years in Tucson, Arizona, specializing in antique Native American art, early Western art, including the famed Maynard Dixon, as well as modern art. You can find everything online at medicinemangallery.com. There's over 6,000 objects to select from. Also, the Charles Bloom Murder Mystery Series, written by yours truly, me, Mark Sublette. There's 6 books in this series, and they follow the protagonist Charles Bloom through all the intrigue of the art world set in Santa Fe and the Navajo Nation. These can be found on Audible, eBooks, Amazon, and of course, the gallery at medicinemangallery.com.